The Texas sun blazed mercilessly over the construction site in northwest San Antonio, turning the concrete and steel into a scorching maze of heat and dust. Daniel Hayes wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his work glove, leaving a streak of grime across his weathered face. At 42, his body already felt decades older, every muscle aching from the relentless labor that had become his life. "Hayes, those pallets aren't going to move themselves." Frank Morrison, the site foreman, shouted from across the skeletal framework of what would eventually become another luxury apartment complex. Daniel nodded without looking up, grabbing the handles of the pallet jack and wheeling another load of cinder blocks toward the south wall. The December morning carried an unseasonable warmth, typical of San Antonio's unpredictable winter weather. Sweat dripped down Daniel's back beneath his high-visibility vest and worn denim shirt. His calloused hands gripped the jack's handle with mechanical precision, a rhythm he'd perfected over 4 years of manual labor. 4 years since everything had fallen apart. "You good, man?" Jimmy Patterson, a younger worker who'd befriended Daniel over shared lunch breaks, approached with 2 bottles of water. He handed one to Daniel, concern evident in his brown eyes. "You look like hell." Daniel accepted the water gratefully, downing half the bottle in 3 long gulps. "Just tired. Didn't sleep much last night." "Still doing the delivery gig after work?" Jimmy asked, leaning against a concrete pillar. "Every night till midnight. Sometimes later." Daniel's voice carried the flat exhaustion of someone who'd normalized running on empty. "Rebecca's physical therapy bills don't pay themselves?" Jimmy shook his head sympathetically. He knew the basics of Daniel's story. Most of the crew did. The accident 5 years ago, the wife who survived but would never walk normally again, the medical debt that swallowed every paycheck like a black hole. "That's brutal, brother. No way to live." Daniel shrugged, draining the rest of his water. "It's what it is. A lot of people got it worse." What Jimmy didn't know, what Daniel rarely talked about, was the other life he'd left behind. The guitar that gathered dust in the back of his bedroom closet, the voice that once filled honky-tonks from Austin to Houston, the dreams that had died somewhere between the hospital waiting room and the collection agency phone calls. The lunch whistle blew at noon, and Daniel found his usual spot in the shade of an equipment trailer. He pulled his phone from his pocket, checking messages while unwrapping the turkey sandwich Rebecca had packed that morning. A text from her. "Tyler has a school thing tonight at 7. Can you make it?" Daniel's jaw tightened. Another school event he'd miss. He typed back quickly, "Have delivery shift. Tell him I'm sorry." He knew what would come next. The disappointment, the argument, the wall of silence that had grown between him and his 16-year-old son over the past year. Tyler didn't understand why his father worked himself to the bone. Worse, he didn't understand why Daniel had forbidden him from pursuing music. "You coming to Kenny's retirement party Friday?" Jimmy asked, settling down beside him with a sub sandwich that smelled like meatballs and marinara. "Can't. Need the hours." "Man, you gotta take a break sometime. When's the last time you did something just for yourself?" Daniel considered the question. 5 years? 6? Time had blurred into an endless cycle of work, bills, and guilt. "Don't remember." Jimmy was about to respond when Frank Morrison's voice cut through the lunch chatter. "Hayes, need to see you in the office." The tone made Daniel's stomach drop. In construction, being called to the office during lunch was never good news. He stood, brushing concrete dust from his jeans, and walked toward the temporary office trailer parked near the site entrance. Frank sat behind a cluttered desk, his expression uncomfortable. Daniel had worked for him long enough to recognize bad news coming. "Close the door, Daniel." Daniel obeyed, remaining standing. "What's going on?" Frank sighed, removing his hard hat and running a hand through thinning gray hair. "Company's cutting back. The Martinez development project got postponed, and we're over budget on this one. I have to let 3 guys go." The words landed like physical blows. "Frank, I've never missed a day. I show up early. I stay late. I know. And you're a good worker. But it's last in, first out policy. Union rules." Frank's face reddened with obvious discomfort. "If it were up to me? When?" Daniel's voice came out hollow. "End of today." "I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am. You'll get 2 weeks severance and your accrued PTO paid out." Daniel nodded mechanically, his mind already racing through calculations. The mortgage payment due in 2 weeks. Rebecca's next round of physical therapy appointments. Tyler's school expenses. The mountain of hospital debt that never seemed to shrink, no matter how much he paid each month. "I appreciate you telling me straight," Daniel managed to say, though his voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Frank stood, extending his hand. "You're a good man, Daniel. Things'll work out." Daniel shook his hand without believing the sentiment, then walked out of the trailer into the harsh December sunlight. The construction site suddenly looked different. Temporary, already part of his past. Jimmy caught his eye from across the site, his expression asking the question Daniel couldn't bear to answer yet. He finished his shift in a daze, his body moving through familiar motions while his mind spiraled through worst-case scenarios. At 4 o'clock, Frank called the crew together and made the announcement. 3 names. Daniel Hayes was the first one called. The drive home took 30 minutes through San Antonio's sprawling neighborhoods. Daniel's truck, a 15-year-old Ford F-150 with 180,000 miles on the odometer, rattled over the uneven streets. He turned onto Blanco Road, heading toward the modest subdivision where they'd lived for 8 years, back when he'd still believed things would get better. The house was a small, single-story ranch, with beige siding and a front yard that needed mowing. Daniel had been meaning to fix the broken shutter on the living room window for months, but never found the time. Now, he'd have plenty of time and no money to buy materials. Rebecca's adapted van sat in the driveway, the wheelchair lift visible through the rear windows. Daniel parked beside it and sat for a moment, gathering the courage to walk inside and deliver the news. The front door opened before he reached it. Rebecca appeared in her motorized wheelchair, her auburn hair pulled back in a ponytail, concern written across her still beautiful face. At 40, she carried the toll of 5 years of chronic pain and limited mobility, but her green eyes remained sharp and perceptive. "You're home early," she said, reading his expression immediately. "What happened?" Daniel stepped inside, the air conditioning a welcome relief from the heat. Their living room was modest but clean, decorated with family photos that seemed to mock him now. Pictures from better times, from before. "They let me go," he said simply, collapsing onto the worn couch. "Budget cuts." Rebecca wheeled closer, placing her hand on his knee. "Oh, Daniel. 2 weeks severance. That'll cover next month's mortgage if we're careful with everything else." He rubbed his face with both hands, feeling the stubble he hadn't had time to shave that morning. "I'll find something else. Construction work isn't that hard to come by. Maybe with one of the other companies. What about the delivery job? I'll pick up more shifts there until something else comes through. Maybe look into warehouse work. Forklift operation." Jimmy mentioned his cousin might be hiring at the distribution center. Rebecca's grip tightened on his knee. "We'll figure it out. We always do." The front door opened again, and Tyler walked in, backpack slung over one shoulder. He'd inherited Rebecca's auburn hair and Daniel's lean build, though he stood 3 inches taller than his father already. At 16, he carried himself with the uncertain confidence of adolescence, caught between childhood and whatever came next. "Dad? Why are you home?" Tyler's eyes darted between his parents, immediately sensing tension. "Lost my job today," Daniel said, deciding honesty was easier than excuses. Companies cutting back. Tyler's expression flickered through surprise, concern, and something else Daniel couldn't quite identify. "That sucks. What are you gonna do?" "Find another job." "What else?" Daniel stood, suddenly needing distance from the concern in their faces. "I'm gonna clean up before my delivery shift." "About tonight," Rebecca started. "Can't make it. Need every hour I can get now." Daniel headed toward the hallway, guilt already gnawing at him. "Dad, it's the Winter Music Showcase," Tyler called after him. "I'm performing." Daniel stopped, his back to his son. "You're performing? I thought we talked about this." "You talked. I listened. There's a difference." Tyler's voice carried an edge Daniel recognized, the same stubborn streak he'd had at that age. Daniel turned around slowly. "We don't have money for music lessons or equipment or any of that right now, Tyler. We've been over this. I'm using the school's equipment. It doesn't cost anything. It's a waste of time. Music isn't a career. It's a hobby for people who can afford hobbies." The words came out harsher than Daniel intended, sharpened by the day's frustration. Tyler's face flushed with anger. "You used to think differently. Or did you forget you used to play 6 nights a week?" "That's enough," Rebecca intervened, but both Daniel and Tyler ignored her. "I played in bars for tip money and free drinks. Real, sustainable career path." Daniel's voice rose despite his attempt to control it. "You know where that got me? Nowhere. You want to end up like me? Breaking your back for minimum wage? Maybe I want to end up like you used to be," Tyler shot back. "Before you gave up on everything." The words hit Daniel like a physical blow. For a moment, he stood frozen, the weight of his son's accusations settling over him like concrete. Tyler stared at him, hurt and defiance mixing in his young face. "Go to your room," Daniel said quietly. "Gladly." Tyler shouldered past him, his bedroom door slamming hard enough to rattle the frames on the hallway wall. Daniel and Rebecca sat in heavy silence. She wheeled closer, her hand finding his again. "He doesn't mean it," she said softly. "He's 16 and angry about things he doesn't understand. He means every word." Daniel's voice was hollow. "And maybe he's right. You're doing what you have to do to keep this family afloat. That's not giving up. That's growing up." Daniel wanted to believe her, but the truth sat like acid in his stomach. He'd traded his dreams for survival, and somewhere in that trade, he'd lost the ability to believe his son could do any better. He showered quickly, changed into clean jeans and his delivery shirt, and kissed Rebecca goodbye. "Don't wait up. I'll be late." The evening shift started at 6 and ran until midnight, sometimes later if the orders kept coming. Daniel drove from restaurant to apartment, from suburb to downtown, following the GPS directions with mechanical efficiency. Each delivery was the same: knock, smile, hand over the food, collect the tip if there was one, move on to the next. Around 9 o'clock, as he waited for an order at a barbecue place on South Presa Street, his phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Tyler was amazing tonight. Everyone loved him. Wish you'd been there." Below the message was a photo: Tyler on stage, guitar in hands, spotlights catching the concentration on his young face. He looked so much like Daniel had at that age, back when the world had seemed full of possibility instead of obstacles. Daniel stared at the photo for a long moment, something painful twisting in his chest. He'd missed it. Another moment he couldn't get back. Another brick in the wall between him and his son. He pocketed the phone and grabbed the order, pushing the guilt down where it lived with all the other things he couldn't fix. The night dragged on, delivery after delivery, until finally, at 12:30 a.m., Daniel pulled into his driveway, exhausted to the bone. The house was dark, except for the porch light Rebecca always left on. He sat in the truck for a moment, too tired to move, staring at the house that represented everything he was failing to protect. Tomorrow, he'd start looking for work. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to make the numbers work. Tomorrow, he'd try to bridge the growing distance between him and Tyler. But tonight, Daniel Hayes sat alone in his truck, carrying the weight of broken dreams and wondering when exactly he'd become the man his son pitied. The next morning arrived with the gray light of an overcast December day. Daniel woke at 5:30 out of habit, his body's internal alarm still set for construction work that no longer existed. He lay in bed listening to Rebecca's soft breathing beside him, staring at the ceiling and mentally reviewing his options. By 6:15, he was showered and sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop, a 4-year-old machine that took 3 minutes to boot up, searching job sites, construction companies, warehouses, retail management positions. He filled out applications methodically, each one requiring the same information, the same history, the same explanation of skills and experience. "You're up early," Rebecca said, wheeling into the kitchen around 7. "Did you sleep at all?" "A few hours." Siegmund. Daniel accepted the coffee she poured him, grateful for her ability to navigate the kitchen from her wheelchair. They'd modified the counters and cabinets after the accident, one of the few good uses of the insurance settlement before medical bills consumed the rest. "Any leads?" "Sent out 12 applications already. I'll go in person this afternoon to some of the bigger construction companies. Face-to-face sometimes works better than online forms." He rubbed his eyes, already feeling the exhaustion of another long day ahead. "Called Carl Wilson at Alamo Construction. He said they might have something in January." "That's almost a month away." "I know." Daniel's voice was flat. "I'll pick up extra delivery shifts until then. Maybe look into some of the gig economy stuff, furniture assembly, handyman tasks, whatever I can find." Rebecca wheeled closer, her hand finding his shoulder. "We're going to be okay, Daniel. We've been through worse." Daniel wanted to believe her, but the math didn't support optimism. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, food, Rebecca's medical expenses, car payments. The numbers didn't lie. 2 weeks of severance and whatever he could scrape together from deliveries wouldn't cover it all. "Tyler still asleep?" he asked, changing the subject. "Teenagers and Saturday mornings. You know how it is." Rebecca's tone carefully neutral, not mentioning the argument from the previous night. Tyler emerged around 8:30, hair disheveled, wearing sweatpants and an Austin City Limits t-shirt Daniel had bought him 2 years ago. He poured cereal without acknowledging his father, the silence deliberate and pointed. "Your mom said you did well last night," Daniel offered. An awkward peace offering. Tyler shrugged, not looking up from his bowl. "It was fine. She showed me the picture. You looked good up there." "Thanks." The word was clipped, dismissive. Rebecca cleared her throat. "Tyler has practice with his band this afternoon. At Kevin's house." "Kevin Rodriguez?" Daniel asked. "The kid with the drum set?" "Yeah. His dad converted their garage into a practice space." Tyler finally looked at his father, defensive. "It doesn't cost anything before you ask. Kevin's family lets us use their equipment." Daniel bit back his initial response, remembering his conversation with Rebecca about picking his battles. "How are you getting there?" "Lydia's picking me up." Tyler returned his attention to his cereal. Lydia Chen was Tyler's best friend since middle school, a quiet girl who played keyboards and shared Tyler's passion for music. Daniel had always liked her, even if he worried about Tyler spending so much time on what he considered a dead-end pursuit. "What time will you be home?" 5 or 6. "We're working on some new material for the spring talent show." Daniel opened his mouth to remind Tyler that spring talent shows didn't pay bills or lead to careers, then stopped himself. The lecture could wait. Today, he needed to focus on finding work, not alienating his son further. After breakfast, Daniel spent 3 hours sending out more applications and making phone calls. Some went straight to voicemail. Others promised to review his resume and get back to him. None offered immediate hope. Around noon, he drove to 4 different construction companies, filling out paper applications and asking about openings. The responses ranged from polite interest to barely concealed skepticism. One supervisor, a heavy-set man named Doug Stevens at Trinity Construction, was more encouraging. "We might have something starting after New Year's," Stevens said, reviewing Daniel's application in a cluttered office that smelled like coffee and cigarette smoke. "You've got good experience with Morrison's crew. Frank runs a tight operation. Can I ask what the position would pay?" Daniel kept his voice neutral, professional. "Starting would be $16 an hour, $18 if you can operate heavy equipment." $16 was $2 less than he'd been making at Morrison's. Daniel did the quick math. Based on a 40-hour week, that was $80 less per week, roughly $320 less per month. They were already stretched thin. "I can operate most heavy equipment," Daniel said. "Forklifts, loaders, backhoes. I'm certified on all of them." Stevens made a note on the application. "We'll do a skills assessment if we bring you on. I'll give you a call next week. See where we're at with staffing." "I appreciate it." Daniel left, feeling the strange mix of hope and dread that came with job hunting. Next week meant another 7 days of uncertainty. Another week of watching their bank account drain while bills kept coming. His phone rang as he reached the truck. Unknown number. San Antonio area code. "This is Daniel Hayes." "Mr. Hayes, this is Nicole Bradford from Westlake Community Bank. I'm calling regarding your mortgage account." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Yes? Our records show your December payment is 10 days past due. I'm calling to arrange payment and discuss your options. I know it's late. I'm working on it. I had some job changes, but I'll have the payment to you by the end of next week." Daniel climbed into his truck, closing the door against the cold wind that had picked up. "I understand these situations can be difficult, Mr. Hayes. However, we need to receive payment within 7 days to avoid starting the late fee process and credit reporting. After 30 days, we're required to begin foreclosure proceedings." The word foreclosure hit like ice water. "That's not going to happen. I've never missed a payment in 8 years. I'm sure we can work this out. Can you make a partial payment this week to show good faith?" Daniel calculated mentally. Severance check would arrive Wednesday, but that money was already allocated. Next month's mortgage, utilities, minimum payments on credit cards, and medical bills. "I can get you $500 by Wednesday," he said, the number leaving his mouth before he'd fully thought it through. "The rest by the following Monday." "That would be acceptable. I'll note the arrangement in your account. We'll expect the remaining balance no later than December 30th. After Bradford hung up, Daniel sat in the truck, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to control the panic rising in his chest. He'd just promised $500 he didn't have a plan to produce. The severance was supposed to cover January's mortgage. If he used it for December's late payment, January would be even worse. He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. Checking account, $487. Savings account, 1,213. The remains of their emergency fund, depleted over years of actual emergencies. Credit cards maxed out. No other resources. The delivery app notification popped up on his screen. Lunch rush starting. Orders available. Daniel started the truck and headed toward the first pickup location. If he worked 12-hour shifts the next 3 days, maybe he could bridge the gap. Maybe. The afternoon bled into evening. Delivery after delivery. Around 4 o'clock, as Daniel waited for an order at a Mexican restaurant near the Riverwalk, his phone buzzed with a text from Tyler. "Band practice running late. Might be 7 before I'm home." Daniel replied, "K. Be safe." A minute later, another message. "We got asked to play at the Spring Festival downtown in March." Kevin's dad said yes. Daniel's fingers hovered over the keyboard. He wanted to be supportive, wanted to be the father who encouraged his son's passions. But the words that formed were practical, cautious. "That's nice. Just remember, grades come first." The response was immediate. "Whatever." By the time Daniel returned home at 12:30, exhausted and $147 richer from tips and delivery fees, the house was quiet. A plate covered in foil sat on the counter. Rebecca had saved him dinner. He ate cold chicken and rice standing at the sink, too tired to bother heating it up. Sunday passed in similar fashion, job applications in the morning, delivery shifts from noon until midnight. By Monday, Daniel had sent out 29 applications and made $600 in delivery income. It wasn't enough. Tuesday morning brought a call from Jimmy Patterson. "Hey man, my cousin at the distribution center called me back. They're doing interviews on Thursday for warehouse associates. You interested?" "Absolutely." "What's the pay?" $15.50 an hour to start, but it's full-time with benefits. Night shift, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Daniel winced. Night shift would mean even less time with family, sleeping while everyone else was awake. But benefits, real health insurance that might actually cover some of Rebecca's therapy. That alone was worth considering. "Can you text me the details?" "Already sent them. Reference my name in the application." These guys move fast, so if you're interested, apply today. Daniel spent Tuesday afternoon filling out the warehouse application and researching the company, Allied Distribution Services, a national logistics firm with a facility on the east side of San Antonio. The pay was lower than construction, but the benefits package looked solid. Medical, dental, vision, 401k matching after a year. He submitted the application with Jimmy's reference and immediately received an automated response scheduling him for a phone screening Wednesday at 2 p.m. That evening, as Daniel ate dinner with Rebecca and Tyler for the first time in days, his phone rang. Morrison Construction. His heart jumped. Maybe Frank had found a way to bring him back. "Daniel Hayes." "Daniel, it's Frank Morrison." The foreman's voice was serious, formal. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me." "Of course." "Did you take any tools when you left Friday?" "I'm doing inventory, and we're missing a reciprocating saw, a nail gun, and some other equipment. You were the last person in that storage container." Daniel's blood went cold. "What?" "No, I turned in everything, just like always. You know I did. I know what you've always done, but I also know you're in a tight spot financially. If you took them, just tell me. We can work something out. Get them returned without involving the police." "Frank, I didn't take anything. I swear." Daniel stood from the table, walking into the living room. Rebecca and Tyler watched with concern. "Check the sign-out sheets. Everything I used Friday was signed back in. The sheets show equipment out but not returned. Your signature." "That's impossible. I always—" Daniel stopped, remembering Friday afternoon. The chaos of being told he was let go. The rush to finish his last tasks. Had he been so distracted he'd forgotten to complete the sign-in process? "Frank, I did not take those tools. If the paperwork's wrong, that's on me for being distracted. But I didn't steal anything." A long pause. "Look, I want to believe you, Daniel. I do, but this looks bad. I'm going to have to file a report with corporate. If the tools don't turn up, they might want to press charges." "Press charges?" Daniel's voice rose. "For tools I didn't take?" "I'm sorry. It's procedure. If you remember anything or if they turn up, call me immediately." The line went dead. Daniel stood frozen, phone in hand, the implications cascading through his mind. If Morrison Construction filed a police report for theft, even if the charges didn't stick, it would destroy his chances of finding construction work anywhere in San Antonio. The industry was tight-knit. Word spread fast. "Daniel!" Rebecca wheeled over. "What happened?" He told her, the words tumbling out. The missing tools, Frank's accusation, the threat of criminal charges. Tyler listened from the kitchen table, his expression unreadable. "That's insane," Rebecca said. "You've worked for Frank for 4 years. He knows you wouldn't steal. Doesn't matter what he knows. Matters what he can prove." Daniel sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "If this gets out, I'm blacklisted. No construction company will touch me. Then we fight it. We prove you didn't take anything." "How? I don't have the tools. I can't prove a negative." The room fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Daniel felt the walls closing in, the space for error shrinking to nothing. "Dad?" Tyler's voice was quiet. "The warehouse job. Is that still an option?" Daniel looked up at his son. "Yeah. Interview Wednesday. Then focus on that. Get out of construction if they're going to treat you like this." It was the most Tyler had said to him in days, and the fact that his son was trying to be supportive only made the situation hurt more. Daniel nodded, unable to trust his voice. Wednesday morning, Daniel woke with renewed determination. He'd prepare for the warehouse interview, nail the phone screening, prove he could provide for his family despite everything falling apart. At 2 p.m., his phone rang right on schedule. The screening went well. Basic questions about his work history, availability, physical ability to lift 50 pounds repeatedly. The interviewer, a woman named Patricia Ramos, sounded impressed with his experience and Jimmy's reference. "We'd like to bring you in for an in-person interview," she said. "Would Thursday at 10 a.m. work?" "Absolutely. Thank you." After hanging up, Daniel felt the first genuine hope in days. Warehouse work wasn't construction, but it was stable, had benefits, and wouldn't require him to defend his integrity against accusations he couldn't fight. Thursday arrived cold and drizzly, typical for San Antonio's unpredictable December weather. Daniel dressed in his best khakis and a button-down shirt, arriving at Allied Distribution Services 15 minutes early. The facility was enormous, a sprawling warehouse complex with dozens of loading docks and hundreds of employees moving with purposeful efficiency. The interview went smoothly. He met with 2 supervisors who walked him through the facility, explained the job duties, and seemed satisfied with his responses. By noon, they were ready to make an offer. $15.50 an hour to start, full benefits after 60 days, night shift Sunday through Thursday. The hiring manager, Robert Chen, said, "You'd be working in the electronics section, picking and packing orders. Physical work, lots of walking, but you seem more than capable. When would I start? We're doing new hire orientation Monday, December 29th. You'd be on the floor starting January 6th after the holiday shutdown." Daniel did the mental math. Orientation Monday meant no paycheck until mid-January at the earliest. 2 more weeks of surviving on delivery income and dwindling savings. "One thing," Chen said, pulling out a tablet. "We do standard background checks for all new hires. Should be processed in 48 hours, then we're good to go." Background check. Daniel's stomach tightened. Morrison Construction hadn't filed a police report yet. Frank had said he'd check inventory one more time before making it official. But if the report came through before the background check cleared, "Is that a problem?" Chen asked, noticing Daniel's hesitation. "No, no problem. Just making sure I understand the timeline." Daniel forced a smile. "Monday the 29th. I'll be there." He shook hands with both supervisors and walked out into the gray afternoon, feeling simultaneously relieved and terrified. He had a job offer, but it hinged on nothing going wrong in the next 48 hours. That night, as Daniel completed his delivery shift, his phone rang. Unknown number again, but this time with a Nashville area code. He almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but something made him swipe to accept. "Is this Daniel Hayes?" The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Yes, who's calling?" "Mr. Hayes, my name is Brandon Lewis. I'm an event coordinator at the Majestic Theater here in San Antonio. I got your number from the community center where your son performed last week." Daniel's confusion deepened. "I'm sorry. I don't understand. I was at the Winter Showcase last Thursday night. Your son, Tyler, performed 3 original songs. He's exceptionally talented, Mr. Hayes. The reason I'm calling is we're hosting a benefit concert in late January featuring several established country artists. And we're looking for a local opening act." Tyler's name came up. Daniel pulled into a parking lot, needing to focus on the conversation. "You want Tyler to open for a professional concert? We'd love to discuss the possibility with you and him. The event is January 25th, which I know is short notice, but we had our original opener canceled. The headliner specifically requested we find someone local with authentic talent." Lewis paused. "The headliner is George Strait, Mr. Hayes." The name hung in the air like a thunderclap. George Strait, the king of country. The artist whose songs Daniel had learned note for note as a teenager, whose career represented everything he'd once dreamed of achieving. George Strait. Daniel repeated numbly. "He's headlining a benefit for Texas Children's Hospital. It's a big event, sold-out crowd of about 3,000 people. We'd pay Tyler $500 for a 3-song set, and it would be incredible exposure. $500. Exposure. A chance Tyler would never get again." Everything Daniel had told himself about music being impractical warred with the opportunity being offered. "Can I think about it?" Daniel heard himself say. "Talk to my son?" "Of course. I need an answer by Monday, though. The event is 5 weeks away, and we need time to promote the full lineup." Lewis provided his contact information. "I hope you'll consider it, Mr. Hayes. Tyler has something special." After hanging up, Daniel sat in the parking lot, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. Tyler opening for George Strait at the Majestic Theater. It was the kind of break that launched careers, or at least created memories that lasted a lifetime. It was also everything Daniel had been trying to protect Tyler from. The music industry's false promises, the glamour that hid the poverty and instability, the dreams that turned into disappointments. But $500 and George Strait. Daniel drove home through the rainy December night, his mind spinning with conflicting thoughts. When he arrived home at 1 a.m., the house was dark except for a light under Tyler's bedroom door. He stood in the hallway for a long moment, debating whether to knock. Finally, he tapped softly. "Tyler? You still up?" "Yeah." Tyler's voice was cautious. Daniel opened the door. His son sat at his desk, headphones around his neck, a notebook filled with lyrics and chord charts open in front of him. The room was decorated with posters of country music legends, Willie Nelson, Merle Haggard, and yes, George Strait. "We need to talk," Daniel said. "Someone called me tonight. About you." Tyler stared at his father with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Someone called you about me? Who?" Daniel stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. He hadn't been in Tyler's space in months. They'd grown so distant that even entering felt like trespassing. The walls were covered with concert posters and photos from performances, a shrine to the dreams Daniel had spent years trying to discourage. Brandon Lewis, from the majestic theater. He saw you at the showcase last week. Daniel sat on the edge of Tyler's bed, suddenly exhausted. He wants you to open for a benefit concert in January. Tyler's eyes widened. Open for who? George Strait. The notebook slipped from Tyler's hands, landing on the desk with a soft thud. For a moment, he just stared at Daniel, processing the information. You're serious. Dead serious. 3-song set, $500, sold-out crowd. Lewis said he needs an answer by Monday. Tyler stood up, pacing the small room with barely contained energy. George Strait. Dad, Words seemed to fail him. That's impossible. That doesn't happen to 16-year-old kids from San Antonio. Apparently, it does if you're good enough. Daniel watched his son's excitement, feeling the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. But we need to talk about what this means. What do you mean what it means? It means yes. Obviously, yes. Tyler turned to face his father, his expression shifting as he read Daniel's hesitation. You're going to say no, aren't you? I'm going to say we need to think carefully about this. Think carefully? Dad, this is George Strait. Tyler's voice rose with frustration. This is the kind of opportunity people dream about their entire lives. You dreamed about this. The accusation landed squarely. Daniel had dreamed about it for years, opening for legends, playing big venues, making a name for himself. Those dreams had died hard, crushed under the weight of bills and responsibility. That's exactly why I know what comes after, Daniel said quietly. The high of one good show, then the crash, when nothing else materializes. The years of chasing the next opportunity while life passes you by. I don't want that for you. So instead, you want what for me? To end up working construction and deliveries? Miserable and bitter? Tyler's words cut deep, sharpened by teenage bluntness. At least you got to try. You got to chase the dream. Why can't I? Because I'm trying to protect you from the disappointment. Maybe I'd rather be disappointed than spend my life wondering what could have been. Tyler's voice cracked slightly, emotion breaking through his anger. Maybe I'd rather be like you used to be instead of who you are now. Daniel flinched. They stared at each other across the small room, years of unspoken resentment filling the space between them. Is that really what you think of me? Daniel asked. That I'm some bitter failure? Tyler's expression softened slightly, regret mixing with the anger. I think you gave up on the only thing that made you happy. And now you're trying to make me give up too. I gave up music to provide for this family, to make sure you had a roof over your head and food on the table. That's not failure. That's responsibility. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Tyler's voice rose again. Why can't I do both? Why can't I perform and still have a normal life? Because that's not how it works in the real world. Daniel stood, frustration and exhaustion combining into something close to anger. Music is a hobby for rich kids and a gamble for everyone else. The odds of making it are astronomical. And even if you beat those odds, you're looking at years of poverty and instability. You're scared, Tyler said suddenly, his voice shifting from anger to understanding. You're not protecting me. You're protecting yourself from having to watch someone else try what you couldn't finish. The observation hit like a physical blow. So accurate it took Daniel's breath away. He stood frozen, unable to formulate a response that wasn't an admission. I'll think about it, Daniel finally said, his voice rough. We'll talk more tomorrow. He left Tyler's room and found Rebecca waiting in the hallway, her wheelchair positioned where she could hear the entire conversation through the thin walls. You heard all that, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. Most of it. Rebecca wheeled alongside him as they moved to the living room. He's not entirely wrong, you know. Daniel sank onto the couch, rubbing his face with both hands. You think I should let him do this? I think you should let him have the experience, whether it leads anywhere or not. Rebecca positioned herself in front of him, her hands taking his. Daniel, I know why you're scared. I know what happened to your music dreams. But Tyler isn't you. And this isn't 20 years ago. The industry hasn't changed. The odds haven't changed. Maybe not. But he needs to find that out for himself, not because you told him so. Rebecca squeezed his hands. And maybe you need to see that supporting his dreams doesn't mean your sacrifices were for nothing. Daniel looked at his wife, seeing the understanding in her eyes. She'd lived through his transition from musician to working class, had supported him through the grief of giving up his guitar. She understood what this was really about. What if he gets hurt? What if this builds him up just to tear him down? Then we'll be there to help him recover. That's what parents do. Rebecca's voice was gentle but firm. But we can't protect him from every disappointment. And this is too big an opportunity to reject out of fear. They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of the decision pressing down on Daniel like a physical force. Finally, he nodded. Okay, I'll call Louis tomorrow and say yes. Rebecca smiled, leaning forward to kiss him. You're doing the right thing. But as Daniel lay in bed that night, sleep elusive despite his exhaustion, he wasn't sure. The image of Tyler's hopeful face mixed with memories of his own younger self, guitar in hand, believing everything was possible. He'd been so naive back then, so certain that talent and passion were enough. Friday morning, Daniel called Brandon Lewis and accepted the offer. The coordinator was delighted, immediately launching into logistics, rehearsal schedule, technical requirements, promotional materials. Daniel took notes mechanically, committing to bringing Tyler to the Majestic Theater the following Wednesday for a sound check and rehearsal. When Tyler came home from school that afternoon, Daniel was waiting in the living room. I called Louis, Daniel said without preamble. You're doing the show. Tyler's face transformed, joy and disbelief mixing in his expression. Really? You're serious? Dead serious. Rehearsal Wednesday at 4 p.m. You'll need 3 songs ready to perform, probably your strongest material. Tyler launched himself at Daniel, hugging him with unrestrained enthusiasm. Thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. Daniel returned the hug, feeling his son's excitement vibrate through him. It had been years since Tyler had shown him this kind of genuine affection, and the realization of what they'd lost made his chest ache. Don't make me regret this, Daniel said, trying for levity, but hearing the genuine plea beneath the words. I won't. I promise. Tyler pulled back, already planning. I need to call Kevin and Lydia. We need to pick the songs and practice. Should I do originals or covers? Maybe 2 originals and 1 cover? What do you think? The question caught Daniel off guard. Tyler was asking for his opinion, seeking his guidance on music for the first time in years. Originals, Daniel said after a moment. Show them what you can do. Anyone can cover George Strait, but only you can perform your songs. Tyler nodded, pulling out his phone. I'll call the band. Can I use the garage to practice this weekend? Yeah. I'll help you move equipment if you need it. As Tyler rushed to his room to make calls, Rebecca wheeled over to Daniel. See? That wasn't so hard. Easy for you to say. You're not the one who lived through the disappointment. No, I'm the one who watched you live through it. There's a difference. She touched his arm. And I also watched you survive it and become a man who takes care of his family. Tyler sees that too, even if he doesn't always show it. The weekend passed in a blur of activity. Tyler's band convened in the garage Saturday morning. Kevin Rodriguez with his drums, Lydia Chen with her keyboard, and Tyler with his guitar. Daniel listened from the driveway as they worked through arrangements, tweaking harmonies and timing. He was surprised by how good they sounded. Tyler's voice had matured since the last time Daniel had really paid attention, developing a depth and control that reminded him painfully of his own younger self. The songs were well crafted, mixing traditional country storytelling with modern sensibilities. "They're really good," Rebecca said, rolling up beside him. "Tyler has your ear for melody." "He's better than I was at his age," Daniel admitted. "More disciplined, more focused on the songwriting. Maybe that's because he had you as an example. The good parts and the cautionary tale parts." Daniel didn't respond, but the comment settled in his mind as he watched his son through the garage door, utterly absorbed in the music. Monday brought mixed news. The background check for Allied distribution cleared, and Daniel received formal confirmation of his start date. Orientation on December 29th. Regular shifts beginning January 6th. The relief was palpable. One crisis averted. But that afternoon, Frank Morrison called. "Daniel, I wanted to give you a heads up. Corporate is insisting we file a police report about the missing tools. I've pushed back as much as I can, but they're not budging." Daniel's stomach dropped. "Frank, I swear I didn't take those tools. I believe you, which is why I'm calling. The report will be filed tomorrow. It'll probably result in a follow-up investigation, maybe an interview with a detective. I'm sorry, man. I tried to stop it. This is going to destroy my reputation. Not if the tools turn up, or we can prove you weren't involved. Do you have any idea what might have happened that day? Anyone else who had access to the container?" Daniel thought back to that chaotic Friday afternoon. The news of being laid off. The rush to finish his last tasks. Jimmy Patterson was working near that area. And the new guy, what was his name? Brett something? Brett Williamson. Started 3 weeks ago. Frank's voice shifted slightly. "I'll check with them. And Daniel, for what it's worth, I don't think you did this. I'm just caught between company policy and common sense." After hanging up, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands. A police report meant questions, possible charges, and definite blacklisting in the construction industry. Even if he was cleared eventually, the damage would be done. "We'll get through this," Rebecca said, but even her optimism sounded strained. That evening, Daniel threw himself into his delivery shifts, trying to outrun his anxiety with constant motion. Orders piled up, and he worked until 2 a.m., earning $183 but feeling no closer to solving his mounting problems. Tuesday morning arrived with another call from the bank. Nicole Bradford again, her tone professional but pointed. "Mr. Hayes, I'm checking on the payment arrangement we discussed. We were expecting $500 by today." Daniel had completely forgotten. Between the job offer, Tyler's opportunity, and the theft accusation, the partial payment had slipped his mind. "I'm sorry, Miss Bradford. I had some complications. I can get you $300 by tomorrow. The full December payment by next Monday." "Mr. Hayes, we've already extended significant courtesy. I need confirmation you can make these payments. I start a new job next week. First paycheck mid-January. I can make this work, but I need a little more time." Bradford sighed. "I'll note $300 by Wednesday and full payment by December 30th. But, Mr. Hayes, if we don't receive that full payment by the end of the month, we'll have no choice but to proceed with foreclosure protocols. I'm sorry, but those are the regulations." Wednesday arrived cold and clear, a brilliant December day that felt at odds with Daniel's churning anxiety. Tyler was practically vibrating with excitement as they drove to the Majestic Theater that afternoon. His guitar case in the back of the truck alongside Kevin's portable drum kit and Lydia's keyboard. The Majestic Theater was a historic venue in downtown San Antonio, a beautifully restored Art Deco building that hosted everything from concerts to comedy shows. Daniel had played there twice in his 20s, small showcases that had felt like conquering the world at the time. Brandon Lewis met them at the stage door. an energetic man in his 40s with salt and pepper hair and an easy smile. "You must be Tyler. Great to finally meet you in person. And you're Mr. Hayes?" "Daniel." They shook hands. "Your son has real talent, Daniel." The showcase performance was impressive, but I'm excited to hear what he's prepared for this. The theater was empty except for a few tech crew members setting up for evening shows. The stage was smaller than Daniel remembered. Funny how time changed perspective. Tyler and his band set up their equipment with the nervous efficiency of teenagers trying to appear professional. "Whenever you're ready," Lewis called from the middle section of seats. Tyler counted off, and the band launched into their first song, an original called Back Road Memories, a mid-tempo ballad about small-town nostalgia. Daniel stood in the wings, watching his son perform, and felt something crack open in his chest. Memories flooded back. His own performances, the rush of connecting with an audience, the pure joy of creating something beautiful. Tyler's voice filled the theater with surprising power, the lyrics painting vivid images of Texas landscapes and lost loves. Kevin's drumming provided a solid foundation, while Lydia's keyboard added emotional depth. Together, they created something that transcended their ages and experience. The second song was more upbeat, a honky-tonk number with clever wordplay and infectious energy. Daniel found himself tapping his foot, caught up in the performance despite his reservations about the whole situation. For the third song, Tyler paused, adjusting his guitar and speaking into the microphone. "This last one is called The Weight He Carries. I wrote it about my dad." Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't known Tyler had written a song about him. The opening chords were gentle, melancholy. Then Tyler began singing, his voice raw with emotion. He wakes before the sun to chase the day, works his fingers to the bone for bills to pay. Dreams he buried deep, traded for our home, carrying the weight so we don't have to roam. The lyrics continued, painting a portrait of a father who'd sacrificed his passions for family responsibility. But instead of resentment, the song carried understanding and respect, acknowledging the price of those choices while honoring the love behind them. Daniel stood frozen in the wings, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. He'd been so focused on his own regrets, his own fears, that he'd missed seeing how Tyler actually viewed him. Not as a failure or a cautionary tale, but as someone who'd made difficult choices out of love. When the song ended, the sparse audience of tech crew and Brandon Lewis applauded enthusiastically. Tyler looked toward the wings, seeking his father's reaction. Daniel stepped onto the stage, ignoring protocol, and pulled his son into a fierce hug. "That was beautiful," he managed to say, his voice thick. "All of it. You're incredible." Tyler hugged him back. "Did you really like it?" "More than you know." Brandon Lewis approached, beaming. "Tyler, that was outstanding. You're going to kill it at the benefit." Same 3 songs, same arrangement. Perfect. As they packed up equipment, Lewis pulled Daniel aside. "He's got something special, your son. Real potential." "Yeah, I'm starting to see that." "You used to play, didn't you?" Tyler mentioned it. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. "Long time ago. Must run in the family." Lewis handed Daniel a business card. "If you ever want to get back into it, even just occasionally, let me know. We're always looking for local talent for smaller shows." Daniel pocketed the card without committing, but something about the offer lingered in his mind as they drove home. Tyler chattered excitedly about the rehearsal, already planning improvements for the actual performance. That night, after Tyler had gone to bed, Daniel stood in his bedroom doorway, staring at the closet where his guitar gathered dust. He hadn't touched it in 5 years, couldn't bear to even look at it most days. But Tyler's song had stirred something he'd thought was dead. "You should play again," Rebecca said from the bed behind him. Not professionally, just for yourself. For Tyler. I don't know if I remember how, Daniel said. But even as he spoke, his fingers flexed unconsciously, muscle memory awakening after years of dormancy. It's like riding a bike. You never really forget. Daniel pulled open the closet door and reached for the guitar case buried in the back corner. It was covered in dust, the latches stiff from years of disuse. He carried it to the living room and opened it carefully. The guitar, a Martin D28 he'd bought 15 years ago when money had been easier, still gleamed, preserved by its case even if neglected by its owner. Daniel lifted it out, feeling the familiar weight, the smooth wood under his calloused fingers. He strummed tentatively, wincing at how out of tune it was. 5 years without tuning had left it sounding discordant and wrong. He spent 20 minutes adjusting the pegs, finding the right tensions, bringing it back to life. When he finally played a proper chord, the sound resonated through the living room with surprising clarity. Daniel closed his eyes and let his fingers find familiar patterns. A Travis picking style he'd learned from his father. Transitions his hands remembered even if his mind had tried to forget. Rebecca watched from her wheelchair, smiling softly as her husband reconnected with a part of himself he'd abandoned. Daniel played for an hour, working through old songs and discovering his voice was rougher than it used to be, but still serviceable. By the time he put the guitar down, something had shifted inside him. Not a grand revelation, but a small opening. The possibility that maybe all his dreams didn't have to stay buried. Thursday brought the news Daniel had been dreading. A detective from SAPD called, asking him to come to the station Friday morning to answer questions about the missing tools from Morrison Construction. The tone was professional but serious, the kind of formality that preceded accusations. "Am I being charged with anything?" Daniel asked. "Not at this time. We're just gathering information. This is voluntary, but your cooperation would be appreciated." Daniel knew enough to understand that voluntary was a legal fiction. Refusing to cooperate would make him look guilty, but answering questions without a lawyer was risky. He called a legal aid clinic Rebecca had found online, explained his situation to a sympathetic paralegal, and was told that unless they formally charged him, he should answer questions truthfully and briefly, not volunteering extra information. Friday morning, Daniel drove to the police station with his stomach in knots. The detective, a woman named Sergeant Karen Foster, was surprisingly friendly, offering coffee and making small talk before getting to business. "Mr. Hayes, you worked for Morrison Construction until December 20th, correct?" "Yes, ma'am." "And on that day, you had access to the tool storage container where several items went missing?" "I had access like everyone else on the crew. It wasn't locked during work hours." Foster consulted her notes. "Your supervisor, Frank Morrison, indicated you were the last person to sign out equipment from that container on December 20th. A reciprocating saw, nail gun, and some smaller tools. The sign-in sheet shows they were never returned. I was distracted that day. Frank told me I was being laid off right before lunch. I might have forgotten to complete the paperwork, but I didn't take the tools home. Do you have anyone who can verify you returned the tools?" Daniel thought hard. "Jimmy Patterson might have seen me. We were working in the same area most of the afternoon." Foster made notes. "We'll follow up with Mr. Patterson. Mr. Hayes, I have to ask, you're in significant financial difficulty, aren't you? Behind on your mortgage, medical bills, credit card debt? That's not exactly a secret, but I didn't steal tools to sell them if that's what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm establishing context." Foster's tone remained neutral. "Where were you December 20th after leaving the work site?" "I went straight home, told my family I'd lost my job, then left for my delivery shift around 6 p.m. Can anyone verify that?" "My wife and son. I was home from about 4:30 to 6. The questioning continued for another 30 minutes, covering his work history, his relationship with Morrison Construction, his financial situation. Daniel answered truthfully, but carefully, following the paralegal's advice to keep responses brief. Finally, Foster closed her notebook. "Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Hayes. We'll be in touch if we need anything else." "Am I going to be charged?" "That depends on what the investigation turns up. I'd advise you not to leave town." Daniel drove home, feeling like he'd been put through a ringer. The detective hadn't been hostile, but the entire experience had been dehumanizing, being treated like a criminal for something he hadn't done. That afternoon brought better news. Jimmy called, excited and out of breath. "Dude, I found your tools. Well, not your tools, but the missing tools." "What? Where?" "Brett Williamson's truck. I was helping him load some stuff after shift today and saw them in his truck bed, covered with a tarp. When I asked about it, he got all defensive and drove off." I called Frank immediately. Relief flooded through Daniel like physical warmth. Did Frank call the police? He's calling them now. And Daniel? He feels terrible about this whole thing. He wants to make it right. After hanging up, Daniel sat in his truck in the parking lot of a grocery store where he'd stopped to buy cheap dinner ingredients, letting the relief wash over him. Not a thief, not a criminal, just a man who'd been in the wrong place at the wrong time. An hour later, Sergeant Foster called. "Mr. Hayes, we've recovered the missing tools from another employee's vehicle. You're cleared of any wrongdoing. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you for letting me know." That evening, Frank Morrison called personally. "Daniel, I owe you a massive apology. I should have trusted my gut about you instead of jumping to conclusions." "It's okay, Frank. You were doing your job. It's not okay. And I want to make it right. I talked to the regional manager. We're bringing you back, if you want to come. Same position, same pay you were making before. Start date January 6th. Daniel's mind raced. Allied Distribution versus Morrison Construction. The warehouse job offered benefits, but lower pay and night shifts. Construction paid better, but no benefits. And he'd have to work with a crew that might always wonder if he'd really been innocent. "Can I think about it and get back to you Monday?" Daniel asked. "Take your time." "And Daniel, I really am sorry." Over the weekend, Daniel weighed his options with Rebecca. The construction job paid more, but meant uncertainty. The warehouse job paid less, but offered stability and health insurance. "What does your gut say?" Rebecca asked. "My gut says take the warehouse job. Benefits mean less stress about your medical care, and a fresh start might be good." Rebecca nodded. "Then that's what you should do." Monday morning, Daniel called Frank and politely declined the offer, then confirmed his start date with Allied Distribution. One crisis resolved. But the mortgage situation remained critical. The partial payment was due Wednesday, and Daniel was still $300 short. He worked brutal delivery shifts Monday and Tuesday, finally scraping together enough tips and delivery fees to make the payment with $47 to spare. Wednesday, he transferred the money to the bank, then collapsed on the couch, too exhausted to do anything but stare at the ceiling. "2 more weeks until you start the warehouse job," Rebecca said. "We can make it 2 more weeks." Daniel wanted to believe her, but looking at their bank balance, $231, $47 remaining, he wasn't sure how they'd make it until mid-January when his first paycheck arrived. Thursday brought an unexpected call. Brandon Lewis from the Majestic Theater. "Daniel, I have a strange request. George Strait's people reached out. He wants to meet Tyler before the show. Do a quick meet and greet, maybe give him some advice. Would you and Tyler be available this Saturday at 2 p.m.? Daniel's heart raced. George Strait wants to meet Tyler. Apparently, he makes a point of mentoring young artists when he can. It's very generous of him. Saturday at 2, backstage at the Majestic? We'll be there. Tyler's reaction that evening was predictably explosive. Equal parts excitement and disbelief. George Strait wants to meet me? Like, actually meet me? Saturday at 2. You, me, and the king of country. Tyler spent the next 2 days in a state of barely contained nervous energy, practicing his songs obsessively and changing outfits 17 times, trying to decide what to wear to meet his idol. Saturday arrived clear and cold. The kind of crisp December day that felt like a Texas Christmas card. Daniel and Tyler drove to the Majestic Theater in comfortable silence, both processing what was about to happen. Brandon Lewis met them at the stage door again, leading them through the backstage area to a private dressing room. He's finishing up a sound check. Should be here in about 10 minutes. Tyler fidgeted with his phone, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Daniel felt oddly calm, perhaps because his own nerves had been worn down by weeks of crisis. Then the door opened, and George Strait walked in. He looked exactly like his pictures, trim and fit at 73. Wearing jeans, boots, and a button-down shirt, his famous smile genuine and warm. "You must be Tyler Hayes." "I'm George." Tyler stood, shaking hands with obvious awe. "It's an honor, sir. I've been listening to your music my whole life." "Your dad too, I hear." George turned to Daniel, extending his hand. "Daniel Hayes? Brandon tells me you used to play." "A long time ago," Daniel managed, still processing that he was shaking hands with George Strait. "Well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I watched Tyler's showcase video. Kid's got real talent." George settled into a chair, gesturing for them to sit. "So, Tyler, tell me about your music. What do you love about country?" For the next 20 minutes, Tyler and George talked about songwriting, performance, the evolution of country music. Daniel listened, watching his son light up as he discussed his passion with someone who understood it at the highest level. "Your dad ever play for you?" George asked suddenly. Tyler glanced at Daniel. "Not in a long time. He gave up music when I was little." "Why'd you quit?" George asked Daniel directly, his gaze curious but not judgmental. Daniel hesitated, then decided honesty was easier than evasion. "Life got complicated. My wife was in an accident. Medical bills piled up, and music didn't pay enough to keep us afloat. I had to make choices." George nodded slowly, understanding in his weathered face. "I know that story. A lot of guys I came up with made the same choice. Most of them don't regret it, but all of them wonder what could have been." "Every day," Daniel admitted quietly. "You still play?" "Just started again last week, actually. Tyler inspired me to pick up the guitar." George smiled. "That's good. Music isn't just about careers and money. It's about joy and expression. Don't matter if you're playing stadiums or your living room, long as you're playing." He turned back to Tyler. "Same goes for you, kid. Do this because you love it, not because you think it'll make you famous or rich. Those things might happen. They might not. But if you love the music, you'll never regret the time you spent making it." Tyler absorbed this wisdom like gospel, nodding earnestly. George stood, and Daniel realized the meeting was ending. "Tyler, you're gonna do great at the benefit. Just be yourself up there, tell your stories, and let the music flow. That's all country music really is. Honest stories told with heart." "Thank you, Mr. Strait. This means everything. Call me George." He shook Tyler's hand again, then Daniel's. "And Daniel, maybe we'll hear you play again someday. Never too late for second chances." After George left, Tyler turned to his father with shining eyes. "That just happened. That actually just happened." It did. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. George's words echoing in his mind. Never too late for second chances. The days between the meeting with George Strait and the benefit concert passed in a blur of anticipation and anxiety. Tyler practiced obsessively, his band convening every afternoon in the garage to polish their 3-song set until it was flawless. Daniel listened from various corners of the house, impressed despite himself by how professional they sounded. Christmas arrived in the middle of this chaos, a modest celebration with a small tree and carefully budgeted gifts. Daniel had picked up extra delivery shifts on Christmas Eve, working until 2 a.m. to pad their dwindling bank account. The severance pay was gone, swallowed by the mortgage payment and basic living expenses. They had exactly $384, 60 centavos in their checking account, and 17 days until Daniel's first paycheck from Allied Distribution. "We'll make it," Rebecca kept saying, though even her optimism was beginning to sound strained. Tyler's Christmas gift from his parents was new guitar strings and a stage outfit, dark jeans and a pearl snap Western shirt they'd found at a thrift store. It looked sharp enough for a professional performance without breaking their nearly non-existent budget. "Thank you," Tyler said, genuinely grateful for the thought behind the modest gifts. "This is perfect for the show." The day after Christmas, Daniel started his orientation at Allied Distribution. 3 8-hour days of training, safety procedures, warehouse protocols, inventory management systems. The work was straightforward but tedious, and he found his mind wandering during the PowerPoint presentations, already dreading the night shifts that would isolate him from his family even more than his current schedule. But it was steady work with benefits. In mid-January, Rebecca could schedule the surgery her doctors had been recommending for 2 years, a procedure that might restore some mobility to her damaged leg. The insurance from Allied would cover most of it. Small victories, Daniel reminded himself. Focus on those. By December 30th, Daniel had completed his orientation and had 2 days off before his regular shifts began on January the 2nd. The benefit concert was January 25th, giving Tyler 4 more weeks to prepare. Though at this point the songs were so polished, they could probably perform them in their sleep. New Year's Eve passed quietly. Daniel, Rebecca, and Tyler watched the ball drop on television, toasting with sparkling cider and making half-hearted resolutions they probably wouldn't keep. Daniel's resolution, "Survive January," lacked poetry, but felt achievable. January arrived with unseasonably warm weather. Texas winter in full capricious glory. Daniel's night shifts at Allied Distribution began, and he quickly learned that warehouse work was simultaneously mind-numbing and physically demanding. 10 hours on his feet, walking miles through endless rows of shelving, scanning barcodes and pulling items, packing boxes with mechanical efficiency. The other workers were friendly enough, mostly younger people working their way through college, or older folks like Jimmy's cousin, who'd made warehouse work a career. Daniel kept to himself, doing his job competently, but without enthusiasm, counting down the hours until he could go home and sleep. The schedule was brutal. Work 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., drive home, eat breakfast while the family was just waking up, sleep from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., wake up in time to see Tyler briefly before starting the cycle again. Weekends off, theoretically, though he still picked up delivery shifts on Friday and Saturday nights to supplement his income. By mid-January, Daniel was operating in a permanent state of exhaustion. His body clock confused, his mood deteriorating. He'd lost 8 pounds he couldn't afford to lose, his face gaunt, and his hands trembling slightly from chronic sleep deprivation. "You can't keep doing this," Rebecca said one evening, or was it morning? Daniel had lost track as he stumbled through the house preparing for another shift. "You're going to make yourself sick. First paycheck hits Thursday. Then I can cut back on the delivery stuff." Daniel gulped coffee that tasted like burnt cardboard. Just need to get through this week. Tyler watched from the kitchen table, concern evident in his expression. Dad, maybe you should call in sick. Take a night off. Can't afford to. New employees don't get sick time until after 90 days. The truth was, Daniel couldn't afford to stop moving. If he stopped, if he let himself rest, he'd have to confront the reality of what his life had become. A grinding existence of work and sleep with no joy, no music, no connection to the things that mattered. His guitar sat in the corner of the living room where he'd left it after that one night of playing. He hadn't touched it since, too tired to even think about making music. Thursday brought blessed relief in the form of a direct deposit. 140 svetlers. 23 after taxes, his first paycheck from Allied Distribution. Combined with delivery earnings, they had enough to cover February's mortgage with a small cushion for food and utilities. "We made it," Rebecca said, reviewing their bank balance with obvious relief. "We actually made it through January." Daniel nodded, too exhausted to feel triumph. He'd made it, yes, but at what cost? He barely saw his family anymore. Tyler's band practices happened while he slept. Rebecca ate most meals alone or with Tyler. They were ships passing in the night, connected by a house and bills, but disconnected from each other's daily lives. The benefit concert was now 10 days away. Tyler's excitement was palpable, his band practicing final refinements. The performance choreographed down to every guitar lick and drum fill. Brandon Lewis called weekly with updates. Ticket sales were strong, the lineup was set, everything was falling into place. George Strait's manager asked for Tyler's set list, Lewis mentioned during a call the week before the show. They want to make sure there's no overlap with George's material. He's planning something special, apparently. "What kind of special?" Daniel asked. They wouldn't say, but it's got the whole team excited. On January 20th, 5 days before the concert, Daniel's schedule at Allied Distribution shifted unexpectedly. A co-worker's family emergency meant overtime was available, and the shift supervisor offered Daniel extra hours at time-and-a-half pay. "We're talking about 6 to 8 extra hours between now and Sunday," the supervisor explained. "I know you're new, but you're one of our most reliable workers. You interested?" Daniel's immediate instinct was to decline. He was already operating on fumes. But 8 hours at time-and-a-half meant almost $200 extra. That could cover the gap in Rebecca's medical expenses, maybe even let them buy groceries without counting every dollar. "I'll do it," he heard himself say. Rebecca's face fell when he told her that evening. "Daniel, you need rest. You look like you're going to collapse. After the concert. I'll take a few days off after the concert and catch up on sleep." "What about Tyler's show? You'll be there, right?" "Of course I'll be there. I'm not missing that." Daniel tried to sound confident, but even he heard the uncertainty in his voice. The next 5 days blurred together. Work, delivery shifts, overtime, sleep in fragmented chunks that never quite satisfied. Daniel moved through his life like a ghost. Present, but not really there. His mind fogged with exhaustion. On January 24th, the day before the concert, Daniel woke up at 3 p.m. and realized he was scheduled for overtime that night. The concert started at 7 p.m. the following evening. If he worked overtime tonight, he'd finish at 8 a.m., have 11 hours to go home, shower, and make it to the Majestic Theater. It was doable. Barely. Tyler found him in the kitchen, staring at his work schedule. "You okay, Dad?" "Yeah, just tired." "Big day tomorrow." Tyler's excitement was impossible to miss. "Kevin, Lydia, and I are doing one final practice this afternoon. You want to listen?" Daniel wanted to say yes, wanted to spend time with his son before this potentially life-changing performance. But his body felt like lead, his eyes grainy with exhaustion. I need to sleep before my shift, but I'll be there tomorrow. Front row. Tyler's disappointment was evident, quickly masked. Right. Okay. Get some rest. Daniel made it through the overnight shift and overtime by sheer willpower, his body moving on autopilot while his mind drifted in and out of coherence. By the time he clocked out at 8 a.m. on January 25th, he'd been awake for 19 of the last 24 hours, sustained by coffee and determination. The drive home was dangerous. Daniel caught himself drifting twice, jerking awake just in time to correct his steering. He pulled into the driveway at 8:45, stumbled into the house, and collapsed on the bed, fully clothed. "Daniel!" Rebecca's voice penetrated his consciousness. "You need to set an alarm. The concert starts at 7. "I'll set one," he mumbled, already falling into unconsciousness. He meant to set the alarm, truly meant to, but exhaustion pulled him under before his hand found his phone. Daniel woke to Rebecca shaking him hard, her voice sharp with panic. "Daniel, wake up! It's 6:15! He lurched upright, disoriented and confused. "What? It's 6:15! The concert starts in 45 minutes. The information penetrated slowly, then hit like ice water. Tyler's performance. The concert. George Strait. It started in 45 minutes, and the Majestic Theater was a 30-minute drive from their house in good traffic. Oh my God! Daniel was already moving, stumbling toward the bathroom. "Why didn't you wake me earlier?" "I tried. I called. I knocked. Tyler tried to wake you. You were dead to the world." Daniel splashed water on his face, trying to shock his system into alertness. His reflection in the mirror looked haggard. Dark circles, pallid skin, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. He'd promised Tyler he'd be there. Front row. He threw on the cleanest clothes he could find, grabbed his keys, and ran for the truck. Rebecca was already by the door, her motorized wheelchair positioned to leave. "Tyler left an hour ago with Brandon Lewis to do sound check," she said. "He was upset you weren't awake." The drive downtown was a nightmare. Friday evening traffic combined with an event at the Alamo Dome created gridlock. Daniel weaved through cars, his heart pounding, checking the time obsessively. 6:30, 6:45, 6:58. They arrived at the Majestic Theater at 7:12. The concert had already started. Daniel could hear music from inside as he helped Rebecca out of the van, her wheelchair lift seeming to take an eternity to deploy. Brandon Lewis met them at the door, his expression tight. "Tyler goes on in 5 minutes. He's been asking for you." "I know. I'm sorry. Backstage. Now. He needs to see you before he performs." Daniel ran, leaving Rebecca with an usher who promised to get her to her seat. The backstage area was chaos. Crew members, other performers, equipment everywhere. He found Tyler in a small dressing room, pacing frantically, while Kevin and Lydia tried to calm him down. "Dad!" Tyler's relief mixed with anger. "Where were you? You said front row." "I'm so sorry. I overslept. I've been working overtime and—" The excuse sounded weak, even to his own ears. "I'm here now." "You're here now," Tyler repeated, his voice breaking slightly. 5 minutes before I'm supposed to perform in front of 3,000 people and George Strait. And you're here now." "Tyler, I'm sorry. I wouldn't have missed this for anything. You just prioritized work over me. Again." Tyler's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "It's fine. I'm used to it." "Tyler, I have to go on stage." Tyler grabbed his guitar, his jaw set. "Thanks for showing up. Better late than never, right?" He pushed past Daniel and headed toward the stage entrance. Kevin and Lydia followed, giving Daniel sympathetic looks that somehow made it worse. Daniel stood alone in the dressing room, the weight of his failure crushing down on him. He'd promised his son, and he'd broken that promise. All the overtime, all the extra shifts, all the sacrifice meant nothing compared to missing this moment. He made his way to the wings, watching from the shadows as Tyler and his band took the stage. The theater was packed, every seat filled, the audience buzzing with anticipation. The house lights dimmed, spotlights illuminating the stage. Tyler stepped to the microphone, looking small and vulnerable under the bright lights. "Good evening, San Antonio. My name is Tyler Hayes, and these are my friends Kevin Rodriguez and Lydia Chen. Thank you for having us tonight." His voice was steady, professional, hiding whatever turmoil he felt. The band launched into Back Road Memories, and Tyler's talent immediately silenced any residual chatter in the audience. His voice filled the theater with confidence and emotion, his guitar work precise and expressive. Daniel watched from the wings, pride and regret warring in his chest. His son was incredible, so much better than Daniel had been at that age, so much more disciplined and focused. And Daniel had almost missed it because he couldn't manage his own exhaustion. The first song ended to enthusiastic applause. Tyler smiled, visibly relaxing, and started the second song, the upbeat honky-tonk number that got feet tapping throughout the audience. Daniel glanced around and realized he was standing next to George Strait, who was also watching from the wings, scheduled to perform later in the evening. "Your boy's good," George said quietly. "Real good." "He's better than I ever was," Daniel admitted. "You made it," George observed. "Wasn't sure you would, from the panic I saw backstage earlier." "Almost didn't. Work ran late." George studied him for a moment, taking in Daniel's exhausted appearance, the wrinkled clothes, the desperate edge in his voice. "How long you been running on empty?" "Too long. Tyler mentioned you're working night shifts at a warehouse and delivery gigs on the side. Medical bills, mortgage, the usual American dream." Daniel's voice carried more bitterness than he intended. "And no time for music. No time for anything." On stage, Tyler finished the second song and began introducing the third, "The Weight He Carries," the song about Daniel. As Tyler explained the inspiration, Daniel felt his throat tighten. "My dad gave up music to take care of our family," Tyler said into the microphone, his voice carrying to every corner of the theater. "He works harder than anyone I know. And even though we don't always see eye to eye, I know everything he does is out of love. This song is for him." The opening chords were gentle, and Tyler's voice carried the raw emotion Daniel remembered from the rehearsal. But this time, performing for a real audience with real stakes, the song hit even harder. Tyler wasn't just singing about sacrifice anymore. He was honoring it, acknowledging it, making it beautiful. Daniel felt tears on his cheeks before he realized he was crying. Standing in the wings of the majestic theater, next to George Strait, watching his son perform a song about him, Daniel Hayes finally understood what he'd been too afraid to see. Music wasn't the enemy of responsibility. Fear was. Fear of failure, fear of disappointment, fear of choosing joy over survival. The song ended to thunderous applause. Tyler took a bow, then gestured toward the wings. "My dad's here tonight. Dad, come out here." Daniel froze. Tyler was calling him on stage in front of 3,000 people. He shook his head, trying to decline, but George Strait put a hand on his shoulder. "Go on. He wants to share this with you." Numbly, Daniel walked onto the stage. The lights were blinding, the applause overwhelming. Tyler handed him a guitar. Where had that come from? And positioned a second microphone between them. "My dad taught me everything I know about music," Tyler said to the audience. "He hasn't played in 5 years, but I think it's time he remembered what it feels like." Tyler counted off, and suddenly Daniel's hands were on the guitar, muscle memory taking over, playing chords he thought he'd forgotten. Tyler began singing a George Strait cover, Amarillo by Morning, and Daniel's voice joined in harmony. Rough and unpracticed, but real. They played together, father and son, their voices blending in ways that transcended technique. Daniel felt something unlock in his chest. 5 years of suppressed emotion pouring out through the music. This was what he'd given up. This was what he'd lost. The song ended, and the audience erupted. Tyler hugged him fiercely, whispering, "Thank you," in his ear. They took a bow together, then walked off stage to make room for the next act. Backstage, Daniel couldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline, the emotion, the sheer terror and joy of performing again after so long, it all crashed over him at once. "You did great," Tyler said, his earlier anger seemingly forgotten in the shared experience. "I can't believe you just did that." "I can't either." Daniel laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "Your performance was incredible, Tyler. I'm so proud of you." "Yeah?" Tyler's smile was uncertain, hopeful, beyond words. They stood in the backstage chaos, father and son reconnected through music, when Brandon Lewis approached with George Strait beside him. "Tyler, Daniel, can we talk for a minute?" George gestured toward a quiet corner away from the activity. They followed, Daniel's heart rate beginning to slow toward normal. George leaned against a road case, his expression thoughtful. "That was something special out there," George said, "watching you two perform together. There's something I'd like to discuss, if you're open to it." Daniel and Tyler exchanged confused glances. "Of course," Tyler said. George pulled out his phone, scrolling to something. "My foundation, the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, we do a lot of work with children's charities. But we've been talking about expanding our mission to include support for families dealing with medical crises. Families like yours." Daniel's breath caught. "I don't understand. Brandon told me about your situation. Your wife's accident, the medical bills, the financial struggle." George looked directly at Daniel. "I've been where you are, not the exact circumstances, but that place where you're choosing between survival and dreams. It's a soul-crushing position, and nobody should have to make those choices alone. George, I appreciate the thought, but hear me out." George's voice was gentle, but firm. "The foundation wants to help cover your wife's medical expenses, the surgery she needs, the physical therapy, whatever it takes to give her the best chance at recovery." Daniel's world tilted. That's tens of thousands of dollars. The foundation can handle it, but there's more." George turned to Tyler. "You've got real talent, kid. The kind that could go somewhere if you had the right support. I'd like to set up a music scholarship for you. Cover lessons, equipment, maybe help with college when that time comes. No strings attached, no obligation to succeed, just support to pursue your passion without it destroying your family's finances." Tyler looked stunned, unable to speak. Daniel felt tears threaten again, overwhelmed by the impossible generosity. "Why would you do this?" Daniel managed to ask. "Because I can. Because once upon a time, people helped me when I needed it. Because talent deserves a chance, and families deserve support." George smiled. "And because watching you two perform together reminded me why music matters. It's not about money or fame. It's about connection, about expressing what words alone can't say." Daniel thought about Rebecca waiting in the audience, about the mortgage payments and sleepless nights, about the guitar gathering dust and dreams deferred. He thought about Tyler's talent and his own lost years, and the impossible weight of trying to do everything alone. "I don't know what to say," Daniel whispered. "Say yes. Let us help. Then maybe start playing music again. Not for a living necessarily, but for joy. Show Tyler that you can have both: responsibility and passion, survival and dreams. Daniel looked at his son, seeing hope and excitement and disbelief in his young face. Tyler nodded slightly, giving permission. "Yes," Daniel said. "Yes, thank you. I don't know how to repay." "Pay it forward someday," George interrupted. "When you're in a position to help someone else, do it. That's all the repayment I need." The weeks following the benefit concert passed in a strange haze of disbelief and adjustment. The Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation moved with surprising speed, arranging payment for Rebecca's medical expenses and setting up Tyler's scholarship fund. Legal documents were signed, financial arrangements made, and suddenly, the crushing weight that had defined Daniel's existence for 5 years began to lift. Rebecca's surgery was scheduled for late February. Her doctors, freed from worrying about insurance approvals and payment plans, were optimistic about her prognosis. The procedure might restore significant mobility, possibly enough for her to walk short distances with assistance. "I might be able to stand at the stove again," she said one evening, her voice trembling with hope. "Maybe walk to the mailbox." Simple things that most people don't even think about. Daniel held her hand, struggling with his own emotions. "You're going to do great." Tyler's scholarship provided for weekly guitar lessons with a respected teacher in San Antonio, money for new equipment, and funding for a college music program when he graduated high school. More importantly, it lifted the guilt Tyler had been carrying about pursuing music while his family struggled financially. "I can actually do this without feeling like I'm being selfish," Tyler said, sitting with Daniel in the garage where they'd been practicing together. A new routine they'd started after the concert. "You were never selfish," Daniel said. "I was just scared. Scared you'd get hurt. Scared you'd fail. Scared you'd end up like me." "Maybe I want to end up like you," Tyler countered. "The you from tonight. The one who plays music because he loves it, not because he gave up on it." Daniel adjusted the tuning on his old Martin, the guitar feeling more natural in his hands with each passing day. "I'm still figuring out how to be that version of myself. We can figure it out together." They played for hours that night, working through old country standards and Tyler's originals, their voices finding harmonies that only came from shared genetics and newfound understanding. Kevin and Lydia joined them sometimes, the garage sessions evolving into something more serious. A real band with real potential. At work, Daniel gave notice at Allied Distribution after only 3 weeks of employment. The night shifts and warehouse tedium had become unbearable once the financial pressure eased. His supervisor was disappointed, but understanding. "You did good work, Hayes. If you ever need to come back, you've got a reference from me." Daniel returned to Morrison Construction, accepting Frank's renewed job offer. The work was hard, but it allowed him normal hours and time with his family. He kept some delivery shifts on weekends for extra income, but cut back to a sustainable schedule that didn't leave him perpetually exhausted. "You look different," Jimmy Patterson observed one day at the construction site. "Lighter somehow." "I feel different," Daniel admitted, "like I can actually breathe again." In early February, Brandon Lewis called with an unexpected offer. The Majestic is hosting a songwriter showcase in March. Local artists, original material, small audience. "Would you be interested in performing? You and Tyler, maybe?" Daniel's first instinct was to decline, to say he wasn't ready, that his songs weren't good enough. But Tyler's voice in his head, "You can have both," made him reconsider. "Yeah," he said, "we'd love to do it." They spent February preparing, writing new material together, Daniel rediscovering his songwriting skills while learning from Tyler's fresh perspective. The collaboration produced something neither could have created alone. songs that blended traditional country storytelling with contemporary sensibility. Father and son voices creating unique harmonies. Rebecca's surgery went well. The procedure lasted 6 hours, and the recovery was brutal. But her surgeon was cautiously optimistic. "Give it 3 months of physical therapy," he said. "We'll see what's possible." Daniel took time off work to help with her recovery, and they settled into new rhythms as a family. Mornings, he'd help Rebecca with exercises. Afternoons, he worked construction. Evenings, he practiced music with Tyler. Weekends were for family time, simple activities they'd neglected during the years of crisis. "I forgot what normal felt like," Rebecca said one Sunday as they sat on the back porch, watching Tyler throw a football with Kevin in the yard. "Not perfect, but normal, manageable." "I'm still processing it," Daniel admitted. "Keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe there is no other shoe. Maybe this is just life getting better." In mid-March, George Strait's assistant reached out with another surprise. George is doing a private event at his ranch in South Texas next month. Friends, family, some industry people. He'd like to invite your family. Very casual, barbecue and music. A chance for Tyler to network a bit if he's interested. The ranch was stunning. Sprawling acres of Texas hill country. A main house that somehow managed to feel both luxurious and homey. And a dedicated music barn where George and his friends regularly gathered to play. "This is insane," Tyler whispered, as they drove up the long driveway. "George Strait's ranch. We're at George Strait's actual ranch." The gathering was indeed casual. About 50 people, mostly industry veterans and their families, along with some of George's neighbors and longtime friends. George welcomed the Hayes family personally, introducing them around with genuine warmth. "This is Daniel and Tyler Hayes, the father-son duo I told you about, and Rebecca, their matriarch who's recovering incredibly well from surgery." Rebecca, who'd managed the trip with minimal assistance, beamed at the compliment. She was walking short distances with a cane now, progress that still amazed her doctors. The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Food and conversation, stories and laughter, an atmosphere of genuine community rare in any industry. Daniel found himself talking shop with session musicians and songwriters, receiving advice and encouragement he'd never expected. "You've got a good ear," one veteran producer told him. "If you're serious about writing, send me some demos. I know people looking for material." Tyler spent hours with young artists closer to his age, learning about the business side of music, making connections that could prove valuable as his career developed. Lydia and Kevin, who'd also been invited, soaked up everything like sponges. As evening approached, the party migrated to the music barn, a spacious structure with excellent acoustics and enough instruments for a small orchestra. An impromptu jam session started, people taking turns performing or joining in as inspiration struck. George played some of his classics, his voice still strong and his guitar work impeccable. Other artists performed their hits or shared new material. The atmosphere was supportive and celebratory. Music for the joy of making music rather than commercial pressure. "Tyler, Daniel, you guys prepared to play something?" George asked during a break in the action. Tyler looked at his father, silently asking permission. Daniel nodded, feeling surprisingly calm. They'd prepared a new song specifically for this moment, a duet they'd written together about second chances and reconciliation. They took the small stage, Daniel on guitar and vocals, Tyler on guitar and harmonies. The opening chords filled the barn, and Daniel began singing, "I'd forgotten how to dream, forgotten how to fly, buried all my hopes beneath responsibility's weight." Tyler's harmony joined in, their voices blending naturally. "But second chances come in forms we don't expect, through the grace of strangers and a son who won't forget." The song told their story: struggle and sacrifice, distance and reconciliation, the unexpected kindness that changed everything. As they performed, Daniel saw people in the audience nodding along, clearly connecting with the narrative. The final chorus built to a powerful finish, both voices strong and confident. So here's to second chances, to dreams we thought were dead, to music that reminds us there's still beauty up ahead. The barn erupted in applause. George stood, clapping enthusiastically, his smile broad and genuine. "Now that's a hit waiting to happen," he declared. "Someone better be recording this." Several people approached afterward, expressing interest in the song, asking about recording plans, offering business cards and contacts. Daniel accepted them with grateful appreciation, still processing that this was actually happening. On the drive home, Tyler dozed in the back seat while Rebecca and Daniel talked quietly. "Today felt like a gift," Rebecca said. "Like we're living someone else's blessed life." "I keep thinking about where we were 3 months ago," Daniel replied, literally wondering how we'd make it to the next paycheck. And now you're networking with music producers at George Strait's ranch." Rebecca laughed softly. "It's surreal. None of this would have happened if Tyler hadn't been brave enough to pursue music despite my discouragement. He saved us, in a way. You both saved each other. He gave you a reason to start playing again. And you gave him the courage to see what's possible." The Songwriter Showcase at the Majestic Theater in late March was a triumph. Tyler and Daniel performed 3 songs, 2 originals and 1 carefully chosen cover. The small but enthusiastic audience included several local music journalists, and the reviews that appeared in San Antonio publications were glowing. Father-son duo Hayes and Hayes deliver authentic country with emotional depth, one review read. Their original material showcases strong songwriting and natural vocal chemistry. The exposure led to more opportunities, opening slots at local honky-tonks, a regular gig at a popular downtown venue, invitations to participate in regional music festivals. None of it was glamorous or lucrative yet, but it was real, sustainable, and most importantly, joyful. Daniel kept his construction job, but began working on music more seriously in the evenings and weekends. He and Tyler recorded rough demos of their best songs, sending them to contacts they'd made through George's introduction. A small independent label expressed interest, suggesting they work up a full album's worth of material. "This is moving fast," Rebecca observed one evening as Daniel reviewed a potential recording contract. "Are you ready for this?" "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but I'm willing to try. The worst that happens is it doesn't work out, and we're still better off than we were. And the best that happens? The best that happens is we make music we're proud of, share it with people who appreciate it, and Tyler gets to see what's possible when you pursue your dreams with both courage and wisdom." you. In late April, Rebecca walked without her cane for the first time. Only about 20 feet from the kitchen to the living room, but it was 20 feet of independence she'd thought she'd lost forever. She cried with joy, and Daniel held her, marveling at how much had changed in 4 months. Tyler's band, officially named Hayes & Company after much debate, played their first paid gig at a decent-sized venue in Austin, opening for a moderately successful touring act. The $500 payday felt enormous, validation that they were on the right track. "We're actually doing this," Tyler said, on the drive home, still buzzed from the performance. "Like, really doing this." "You're doing it," Daniel corrected. "This is your journey. I'm just along for the ride." "No, we're doing it together. That's the whole point." Tyler looked at his father seriously. "You know what George told me at his ranch? He said the best country music comes from real life, from people who've lived through hard times and come out the other side." He said, "You and I have that authenticity because we lived it." Smart man. The smartest. And the most generous. They heard from George occasionally. Calls to check in, invitations to industry events, advice when they needed guidance. He remained a mentor and supporter, invested in their success without demanding anything in return. In June, the independent label offered a modest recording contract, 3 songs to start, with option for more if they performed well. Daniel and Tyler agonized over which songs to record, finally settling on "The Weight He Carries," their second chances duet, and a new song called "Building Dreams," about pursuing passion alongside responsibility. The recording process was exhilarating and terrifying. Working with professional engineers and producers, hearing their songs transformed by expert production, seeing Tyler absolutely shine in his element, Daniel felt pride beyond words. The 3 songs were released as an EP in August, distributed digitally and to select radio stations across Texas. Sales were modest but encouraging, and several country radio stations added "The Weight He Carries" to their playlists. "You're getting actual airplay," Rebecca marveled, hearing Tyler's voice on their local country station one morning. "Our son is on the radio." "Our son and your husband," Daniel corrected with a grin. "We're a package deal." The EP's modest success led to more performance opportunities. A slot at the Houston Rodeo, opening for a major act at a San Antonio venue, invitations to play festivals across Texas. Daniel requested reduced hours at Morrison Construction, and Frank willingly accommodated, proud to employ someone with growing musical recognition. "Bring me a signed CD when you make it big," Frank joked. "I'll tell everyone I knew you when." By September, a full year after the benefit concert that changed everything, the Hayes family gathered for a celebration dinner. Rebecca was walking almost normally, needing the cane only for longer distances. Tyler had been accepted to the University of Texas's music program with a full scholarship combining Tyler's foundation money with academic merit. Daniel had a second EP in production and a small but growing fan base. To second chances, Rebecca raised her glass of wine, a special occasion splurge. And to family. To George Strait, Tyler added, for seeing something worth investing in. To Tyler, Daniel said, for being brave enough to pursue his dreams and stubborn enough to drag his old man along. They clinked glasses, smiling, a family that had been tested and emerged stronger. That evening, after Rebecca had gone to bed and Tyler was in his room studying for his upcoming high school finals, Daniel sat alone in the garage with his guitar. He played softly, working through a new song about gratitude and transformation, about the unexpected ways life could surprise you when you were convinced everything was hopeless. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Hey Daniel, it's George. Heard your new EP. Really strong work. If you and Tyler are interested, I'm doing a special acoustic tour in the fall. Small venues, storytelling format. Could use an opening act. Let me know." Daniel stared at the message, processing the implications. Opening for George Strait on a real tour, even a small one, was exposure beyond anything they'd imagined. He typed back, "We'd be honored. Thank you for everything." The response came quickly. "Thank me by keeping making honest music. The world needs more of that. And Daniel, I'm proud of you both. Not just for the music, but for finding your way back to each other. That's the real success." Daniel set his phone down, emotion thick in his throat. A year ago, he'd been convinced everything was lost. His dreams, his connection with his son, his family's financial stability, any hope of a better future. He'd been working himself to exhaustion, sacrificing everything for survival, unable to see beyond the next crisis. Now, Sitting in his garage with his guitar, opportunities opening before him, his family healing and thriving, Daniel Hayes understood something fundamental. The dreams you bury don't die. They wait, dormant but alive, for the moment when circumstances and courage align to give them another chance. Tyler appeared in the garage doorway, backlit by the house lights. "Dad, you okay?" "Better than okay," Daniel said, gesturing for his son to join him. "George just invited us to open for his acoustic tour in the fall." Tyler's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. We're doing this, Tyler. Really doing this." Tyler grabbed his own guitar, settling onto the stool across from Daniel. "Should we practice? Start picking songs for the tour?" "Yeah," Daniel said, fingers finding familiar chords. "Let's play." And in that modest garage in San Antonio, under fluorescent lights and surrounded by tools and equipment, father and son made music together. Not for fame or money or even success, but for the pure joy of creating something beautiful, for the connection it forged between them, for the dreams they'd almost lost and miraculously found again. The future was uncertain, as futures always are. But for the first time in years, Daniel Hayes looked toward that uncertainty with hope instead of dread, with excitement instead of obligation, with possibilities instead of limitations. Outside, the Texas night was warm and clear, stars visible despite the city lights. Inside the garage, two guitars wove together in harmony, carrying melodies that spoke of struggle overcome and hope reborn. Rebecca listened from the doorway, leaning on her cane and smiling at the sight of her husband and son united in the passion they shared. This was what George Strait had given them. Not just financial relief or career opportunities, though those were precious gifts. He'd given them permission to believe again, permission to pursue joy alongside responsibility, permission to understand that sacrifice and dreams didn't have to be enemies, that a man could provide for his family and feed his soul at the same time. Daniel looked up from his guitar and caught Rebecca's eye. She mouthed, "I love you," and he felt the weight of that love, not as burden, but as foundation. Everything he'd done, every sacrifice he'd made, had been built on that love. And now, finally, he was learning to build something else on it too. A future where work and passion, duty and desire could coexist. "You know what?" Tyler said, pausing between songs. "When I was younger, I used to resent that you'd given up music. I thought you were weak for quitting, for choosing the safe path. And now?" Daniel asked quietly. "Now I understand you were the strongest person I knew. You did what had to be done, even though it broke your heart. That's not weakness. That's love." Tyler's voice was thick with emotion. "And then, when you got a second chance, you were brave enough to take it. That's even harder." Daniel couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He simply reached out and squeezed his son's shoulder, conveying everything words couldn't express. They played late into the night, losing track of time in the music. Songs old and new, covers and originals, their voices blending in harmonies that only family could create. This was healing, not just for Daniel's long, dormant dreams, but for the rifts that had grown between them during the hard years. As midnight approached, they finally set down their guitars, exhausted but content. "Big year ahead," Tyler said, packing his guitar carefully. "Senior year, college applications, recording sessions, and now a tour with George Strait." "Nervous?" Daniel asked. "Terrified," Tyler admitted with a grin, "but excited too. And I've got the best partner I could ask for. I'm just trying to keep up with you, kid. We keep up with each other. That's how it works." Daniel locked up the garage, and they walked back to the house together. father and son side by side. The porch light cast long shadows across the yard, and in the distance, San Antonio hummed with its endless energy. A city full of dreamers and strivers, successes and struggles. Somewhere in that city, other families were facing their own crises, their own impossible choices between survival and passion. Daniel thought about them now, understanding their pain with intimate familiarity. Maybe someday he'd be in a position to help, to pay forward the incredible generosity George Strait had shown them. That thought crystallized something in his mind. "Tyler," he said, as they reached the front door, "when we make it, not if, when, we should start something. A foundation or a program to help other families dealing with medical crises and trying to pursue music. Something to give others the kind of chance we got." Tyler's face lit up. "Like what George did for us." "Exactly like that. We pass it forward." "I love that idea, Dad. When we make it, that's exactly what we'll do." Inside, the house was quiet except for the soft sounds of Rebecca getting ready for bed. Daniel checked on her, finding her standing by the bathroom sink without her cane, balancing carefully but independently. "Look at you," he said with admiration, "getting stronger every day." She turned to face him, her expression radiant despite the late hour. "I heard you two playing. You sounded wonderful. George invited us to open for his fall tour." "Of course he did. You're both incredibly talented." She moved toward him slowly, and he resisted the urge to help, knowing she needed to do this herself. "I'm so proud of both of you, of our family, and everything we've overcome." Daniel pulled her into his arms gently, mindful of her still healing body. "We couldn't have done any of this without you. You held us together when everything was falling apart. We held each other together. That's what families do." Later, lying in bed with Rebecca asleep beside him, Daniel stared at the ceiling and reflected on the improbable journey of the past year. From the depths of despair, losing his job, facing foreclosure, being accused of theft, working himself nearly to death, to this moment of peace and possibility. He thought about the benefit concert, that night when everything changed. If Tyler hadn't performed, if Brandon Lewis hadn't been impressed, if George Strait hadn't decided to attend that particular showcase, the entire trajectory of their lives would be different. The dominoes of chance and choice that had led them here seemed impossible in retrospect. But maybe that was the nature of second chances. They arrived unexpectedly, disguised as opportunities or strangers or moments of courage. The key was being ready to recognize them and brave enough to accept them. Daniel's last conscious thought before sleep claimed him was a simple one: gratitude. For George Strait's generosity, for Tyler's persistence, for Rebecca's strength, for the music that had found its way back into his life, for the second chance he'd never expected, but would never take for granted. 2 months later, October 2025, the acoustic tour kicked off on a crisp October evening in Austin at a historic theater that held about 800 people. Daniel and Tyler arrived early for sound check, their nerves manifesting in excessive equipment checking and nervous jokes. George found them backstage, looking relaxed in jeans and a casual button-down shirt. "How you boys feeling?" "Like we might throw up," Tyler admitted honestly. George laughed. "That means you care. The day you stop being nervous is the day you should worry." He clapped them both on the shoulders. "You're going to be great. Just remember, this audience came for stories and honest music. Give them that, and they'll love you." The opening set was supposed to be 30 minutes, 4 songs, and some brief stage banter. Daniel and Tyler had rehearsed obsessively, but standing in the wings watching the theater fill up, all that preparation felt inadequate. Then they were being introduced. walking onto stage to warm applause, and muscle memory took over. Tyler counted off their opening song, and suddenly they were performing, their voices filling the intimate space, their guitars creating the foundation for something beautiful. The audience was attentive, respectful, leaning forward to catch every word. When they performed "The Weight He Carries," Daniel saw people wiping their eyes, connecting with the story of sacrifice and love. After their set, the applause was genuine and sustained. Not just courtesy clapping, but real appreciation. "That was incredible," Tyler said backstage, still buzzing with adrenaline. "Did you hear them? They actually loved it." "They loved you," Daniel corrected. "You commanded that stage like you were born to it." George's set was masterful. Stripped-down arrangements of his classics, stories between songs about his career and life. An intimate presentation that felt like being invited into his living room. The audience was enthralled, hanging on every note and word. Midway through his set, George paused and gestured toward the wings. "I want to bring someone back out here. Actually, two someones. Daniel and Tyler Hayes open tonight, and I think we should do a song together. You boys game?" Daniel and Tyler exchanged shocked looks. This wasn't planned, but they grabbed their guitars and joined George on stage to thunderous applause. "You know Amarillo by Morning?" George asked with a mischievous smile. "Sir, I've known that song since I was 12, Daniel replied, getting a laugh from the audience. They played together, George, Daniel, and Tyler, their voices blending in three-part harmony on one of country music's most beloved classics. The audience sang along, the theater transforming into something magical. A moment of pure communal joy. When the song ended, George hugged them both. "Ladies and gentlemen, Hayes and Hayes. Remember those names." The tour continued through October and into November. Small Texas towns and mid-sized cities. Intimate venues where stories mattered as much as musicianship. Daniel and Tyler grew more comfortable with each performance, their stage presence evolving, their connection with audiences deepening. Reviews were universally positive. Hayes and Hayes bring authentic father-son chemistry and strong songwriting to George Strait's acoustic tour. One music blog wrote, "These are artists to watch." Between tour dates, Daniel worked construction and Tyler balanced senior year with his burgeoning music career. The schedule was demanding, but it was sustainable. A far cry from the grinding desperation of a year ago. In late November, the small independent label that had released their first EP called with unexpected news. "The Weight He Carries" had been gaining traction on streaming platforms and country radio. Several major artists had requested permission to record their own versions. "Wait, what?" Daniel said, certain he'd misunderstood. "Major artists want to cover our song?" 3 different artists, actually. "We're negotiating licensing deals. This could be significant income if even one of them releases it as a single." Daniel shared the news with Tyler after school that day. His son's reaction was pure shock, followed by uncontainable excitement. "Dad, do you understand what this means? Professional artists want to record our song. The song I wrote about you. The song we perfected together," Daniel corrected. "This is your success, Tyler. You made this happen. We made this happen. You, me, Mom, George, all of us together." By December, 1 year after the benefit concert that changed everything, the Hayes family had transformed in ways they couldn't have imagined. Rebecca was walking almost normally, planning to return to part-time work after years of medical leave. Tyler had been accepted to UT Austin's music program and had 3 songs climbing regional country charts. Daniel had a construction job he actually enjoyed and a music career that brought joy instead of stress. And on Christmas morning, they received a gift from George Strait, A framed photo from that first night at the Majestic Theater, showing Daniel and Tyler on stage together, their faces illuminated by spotlight and genuine happiness. George had signed it, "To the Hayes family," proof that second chances are real and dreams don't die. They just wait for the right moment. Keep making honest music. With admiration and friendship, George. Daniel hung the photo in the living room, where it would serve as a daily reminder of how much could change, how quickly life could transform from impossible to extraordinary. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Rebecca standing to help serve, Tyler excitedly discussing tour plans for the following summer, Daniel feeling a peace he'd thought was lost forever, he raised his glass for a toast. "To second chances," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To family, to the kindness of strangers who become friends, and to George Strait, who saw something worth saving in two musicians who'd almost given up." "To George," Rebecca and Tyler echoed. "And to us," Tyler added, "for being brave enough to try again." They clinked glasses, a family rebuilt and renewed, standing together on the foundation of love and sacrifice that had always sustained them, now augmented by hope and possibility, and the knowledge that dreams deferred are not dreams denied. They're just waiting for their moment to bloom again. Outside, the December evening was cool and clear, stars bright in the Texas sky. Inside, the Hayes family celebrated not just Christmas, but survival, resurrection, and the unexpected grace that had carried them from darkness into light. The road ahead remained uncertain. Music careers rarely follow predictable paths, and life has a way of throwing unexpected challenges even at those who've already survived so much. But Daniel Hayes no longer faced uncertainty with dread. He faced it with his family beside him, his guitar in his hands, and the knowledge that second chances are real, that kindness matters, and that sometimes, just sometimes, everything actually does work out. And in a ranch somewhere in South Texas, George Strait received a photo from the Hayes family. Daniel, Rebecca, and Tyler in front of their home, holding their guitars, smiling with genuine joy. Tyler had written on the back, "Thank you for teaching us that success isn't about fame or money. It's about making music with people you love and living a life you're proud of. We're paying it forward. With eternal gratitude, the Hayes family." George smiled, adding the photo to his collection of people he'd helped along the way, knowing that somewhere in San Antonio, a family that had almost lost everything was thriving, creating, and preparing to help others the way they'd been helped. The circle of generosity continued, expanding outward in ripples that would touch lives neither George nor the Hayes family could yet imagine. And somewhere in the Texas night, music played on.